conference room felt like a trap. I stood at the marble table, heart pounding, while he smiled that cruel smile. "Since you're so gifted with numbers, Zara," Burton said, sliding a thick prospectus toward me, "tell everyone what's buried in Section 12 of this merger document." I looked down. Undisclosed pension liabilities totaling $47 million, contingent debt from 3 subsidiary acquisitions, and a tax exposure that caps at 8.3% if the Delaware incorporation fails compliance review. Silence filled the room. Chairs squeaked. I added, "And your recommendation to approve this deal would cost us $60 million in the first quarter alone." His smile died. Mine stayed strong, because that was the day I stopped being afraid of his threats and started planning his destruction. The truth was, I never went to a prestigious college. I never went anywhere. I only finished high school, but I had something better than any degree: a photographic memory and a genuine fascination with numbers. Burton had discovered my secret and used it as leverage for 3 years. But today I realized something crucial. My gift was real, my credentials were fake, and only one of those things actually mattered. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him, not of exposure, not of anything. The real game was just beginning. I'm Zara Khan. The Harvard MBA on my resume doesn't exist. Neither does the Stanford undergrad degree. Just a high school certificate and a brain that processes financial data like a computer. The first time Burton discovered my secret, he called it interesting. The second time, he called it leverage. "Smart girl," he told me, clicking his expensive pen. "Shame about your creative background." He made it clear with that predator smile. One word from him, and my career was over. For 3 years, I built his reputation with my analysis while he held my lie over my head like a sword. Every brilliant trade idea I had became his breakthrough. Every market prediction I made became his genius insight. I ate the humiliation because I needed this job. I swallowed the credit theft because I thought I had no choice. But lies are funny things. Sometimes the biggest lie isn't the one you tell about yourself. It's the one you believe about your own powerlessness. Burton thought he owned me because of what I wasn't. He never realized the power of what I actually was. Smarter than him, hungrier than him, and finally ready to prove it. He humiliated me publicly the first time I tried to speak up. I'd created a complex derivatives model that saved the firm $12 million. He tore it apart in front of the whole team, then presented the exact same analysis as his own brilliant work the next day. "Maybe when you get more experience," he said, patting my head like I was a confused child. "We'll talk about advancement when the timing is right." I locked myself in the bathroom and laughed until tears came, then splashed cold water on my face. The computers didn't care about degrees. The markets didn't ask for transcripts. The money we made was real, even if my credentials weren't. I went back to my desk and opened a new spreadsheet. If Burton wanted to play games with my career, I'd show him what real strategic thinking looked like. Every humiliation would be documented. Every stolen idea would be tracked. Every threat would be recorded. He thought he was building leverage over me. Instead, he was building the evidence that would destroy him. Sometimes the best revenge starts with simply deciding you deserve better than what someone gives you. My salvation came from Juliet Rivera, the new chief risk officer. She'd spent 20 years on Wall Street and had radar for talent that others missed. "Your market analysis is exceptional," she told me after reviewing my latest report. "How did you develop this methodology?" I fidgeted with my pen, scared Burton might overhear. "Just patterns I noticed in the data," I said carefully. She leaned closer. "Zara, I've seen Burton present work that looks remarkably similar to your written reports. Same insights, same mathematical approaches. Is there something I should know?" My mouth went dry. This was it, the moment where I either spoke truth or stayed trapped forever. "Sometimes ideas develop collaboratively," I said weakly. Juliet's eyes narrowed. "In my experience, brilliant analytical minds don't develop collaboratively. They get exploited by people who lack the same brilliance." She slid her business card across the desk. "Coffee tomorrow? Off-site?" I nodded, heart racing. For the first time in 3 years, someone was actually seeing me instead of just seeing Burton's version of me. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as I'd believed. Maybe it was time to test that theory. The coffee meeting changed everything. Juliet chose a small place 20 blocks from our office, away from corporate eyes and Burton's network of spies. I know about Harvard, she said simply, stirring her latte. My blood turned to ice water. I also know you never went there, she continued. What I don't know is why you're letting Burton Walsh destroy your career over it. I stared at my coffee, watching steam rise like my hopes dissolving. He said he'd ruin me if anyone found out. Juliet laughed, but not mockingly. Zara, I've worked with Harvard MBAs for 2 decades. Most of them couldn't produce analysis half as sophisticated as what you do on a random Tuesday. Your education isn't your weakness. It's Burton's excuse to steal from you. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screen full of job postings. Every one of these firms would hire you tomorrow based purely on your track record. Harvard doesn't create talent. It just provides networking opportunities. You've built something more valuable than any degree. Results. I looked up at her, feeling something crack open in my chest. What are you saying? I'm saying it's time to stop being afraid of a lie and start leveraging the truth. Juliet's strategy was simple. Make it impossible for Burton to ignore my value. We document everything, she explained. Every analysis you create, every prediction you make, every dollar your insights generate. When the numbers are overwhelming, credentials become irrelevant. I started copying myself on every report, every trade recommendation, every market insight I developed, not to hide from Burton, to create an undeniable record of my contributions. Meanwhile, I built a quiet network of allies. The junior analysts who'd watched Burton steal my work, the compliance officers who'd noticed inconsistencies in his presentations, the clients who'd started asking specifically for the analyst who predicted the biotech correction. Juliet helped me navigate the politics, but the work was all mine. My next market call hit perfectly, a currency play that netted the firm $8 million in profit. Burton took credit publicly, but privately, people started asking questions. Your assistant seems unusually insightful, one client mentioned to Burton during a call I was monitoring. Perhaps she should join more of our strategy sessions? I watched Burton's face tighten. His weapon was getting dull. My reputation was getting sharp. The promotion opportunity came 6 months later. The firm needed a new quantitative strategist, and my track record spoke louder than any resume. Juliet pushed my candidacy hard, backed by results that couldn't be argued with. But Burton had other plans. He vetoed my promotion in a leadership meeting I wasn't invited to attend. Experience concerns, he told them. Exposure risk for the firm. They folded immediately. Juliet found me staring at my computer screen, watching Burton's latest presentation, built entirely on my analysis from the previous week. We're not done, she said firmly. We're just getting started. She was right. Burton had won this battle by using the system against me. But systems could be changed, and I was learning exactly how to change them. The next promotion wouldn't be up to him. It would be backed by evidence so overwhelming that saying no would look like sabotage. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Promotion Portfolio. Inside went every trade recommendation, every market prediction, every piece of analysis that had generated profits for the firm. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. I started building my fortress one document at a time. Every email got archived. Every trade recommendation got time-stamped and saved. Every market analysis got backed up in 3 different systems. Juliet taught me the art of corporate documentation. Paper trail everything, she said. In this business, memory is worthless, but records are gold. I created a shadow compliance system around my own work. If Burton tried to present my analysis without attribution, I had originals with timestamps proving authorship. If he tried to discredit my insights, I had client feedback praising my specific contributions. If he attempted to block my advancement, I had performance metrics that told the real story. Meanwhile, I started noticing gaps in Burton's own documentation. Trade approvals that appeared without proper backup. Client communications that weren't logged correctly. Risk assessments that bypassed standard protocols. I didn't confront him about these irregularities. Instead, I documented them carefully, building a picture of someone who talked about compliance but didn't always follow it. Knowledge, I realized, worked both ways. Burton had leverage over my past, but I was building leverage over his present. The public humiliation came during our biggest client presentation of the quarter. I'd spent weeks preparing analysis for a pension fund, considering a major allocation to our firm. My research had identified inefficiencies in their current portfolio that could be worth hundreds of millions. But when the presentation started, Burton didn't include me. "Let the senior staff handle this," he said, physically stepping in front of me as the clients entered the conference room. I watched from the hallway as he botched my analysis, mis-explaining key concepts and fumbling through slides I'd created. The pension fund manager looked confused. "These projections seem overly optimistic," she said. "What's your confidence level on the underlying assumptions?" Burton stammered through an answer that made no mathematical sense. After the meeting, the client called me directly. "Zara, is this really how your firm operates? Because the analysis in these slides doesn't match the sophistication I expected from Burton Walsh." I took a deep breath. "I can walk you through the methodology properly if you'd like. The assumptions are actually quite conservative." We scheduled a call for the next day. Burton didn't know it yet, but he'd just handed me direct client access. His biggest mistake was underestimating what I'd do with it. My breakthrough came disguised as a disaster. I pitched a contrarian investment strategy that looked insane on the surface, shorting technology stocks while everyone else was buying. Burton called it reckless gambling and career suicide, but I'd seen patterns in the data that others missed. The tech bubble was ready to burst. "Put me on a paper trade," I asked the risk management team. "If I'm wrong, you can use it as a teaching example of what not to do. If I'm right, you'll want to study the methodology." Burton rolled his eyes and signed off with a dismissive wave. "Your funeral," he muttered. 3 weeks later, the tech market crashed exactly as I'd predicted. My paper portfolio was up 40%, while the market fell 20%. My phone started ringing with calls from portfolio managers wanting to understand my analysis. Burton tried to take credit, claiming he'd supervised the research. But the paper trail was clear. Every prediction, every calculation, every trade recommendation had my name on it. Juliet pulled me aside after the numbers were final. "You just proved something important," she said. "You don't need Burton's permission to be brilliant. You never did." The results rewrote everything. My contrarian trade became legendary within the firm, generating more alpha in 1 quarter than most analysts produced in a year. Suddenly, client calls started differently. "Can we get Zara's take on this?" became a common request. Burton noticed the shift and tried to reassert control, but it was too late. I'd proven my value in a language everyone understood: profit and loss. Juliet leveraged the momentum perfectly. "The risk committee wants you to present your market outlook at next month's board meeting," she told me. "They specifically requested your methodology for predicting market corrections." Burton's face went ashen when he heard. For 3 years he'd kept me in the shadows, stealing credit for my work. Now I was being invited to present directly to senior leadership, and he couldn't stop it without looking petty. I spent weeks preparing, creating presentations that showcased not just my recent success, but the consistent track record I'd built over 3 years. Every slide had my name on it. Every analysis was clearly attributed. Every recommendation included detailed backup showing my unique methodology. Burton had taught me about leverage through fear. Now I was teaching him about leverage through excellence. The cracks in Burton's armor started showing during routine compliance reviews. His trading desk had processed several approvals without proper documentation threads, something that should have been flagged immediately. "System glitch," he explained when asked. But I'd learned to check the audit logs, and there was no evidence of any technical failure. He'd simply bypassed protocols he didn't want to follow. I didn't report it immediately. Instead, I archived the evidence and added it to my growing collection of Burton's shortcuts and corner cutting. Juliet had taught me patience. "Don't fire all your ammunition at once," she'd said. "Save some for when you really need it." But Burton kept making mistakes, and I kept documenting them. Unapproved position sizes that exceeded risk limits. Client communications that promised terms not reflected in actual contracts. Trade confirmations that showed different numbers than what was reported internally. Each violation was small individually, but together they painted a picture of someone who believed rules applied to other people. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was building a case study in why competence matters more than credentials. The opportunity arrived wrapped in a casual conversation. The Chief Operating Officer, Celeste Wheeler, invited me for coffee to discuss structural adjustments in the quantitative division. "We're expanding the analytics team," she explained, "creating a dedicated role for advanced market modeling. Would you be interested?" I stared out the cafe window at the city skyline, thinking about 3 years of stolen credit and suppressed ambition. "What would the role involve?" I asked. "Direct client interface, strategy development, team leadership," she said. "Essentially, you'd run quantitative research for the firm's largest institutional clients." It was everything I'd dreamed of, and everything Burton had blocked me from achieving. "Yes," I said quietly, the word carrying 3 years of frustration and hope. Celeste smiled. "There's a formal process, of course. Board approval, peer review, the usual. But given your recent performance, I don't anticipate any obstacles." As I walked back to the office, I realized Burton's greatest mistake hadn't been stealing my work. It had been teaching me exactly what I was capable of accomplishing without his help. Now I was about to find out what I could accomplish despite his opposition. Burton's response was swift and vicious. He cornered me in the elevator after learning about my interview with Celeste. "You're making a mistake," he whispered, his usual charm replaced by barely controlled rage. "A big one." I looked at our reflection in the polished steel doors, 2 figures, but only one casting a real shadow. "Am I?" I asked calmly. His smile turned predatory. "People are going to start asking questions about your background, Zara. Deep questions, the kind that reveal uncomfortable truths." I felt the familiar chill of his threat, but something was different this time. The fear wasn't paralyzing anymore. "You mean they'll discover I'm smarter than you?" I said. His face darkened. "I mean they'll discover you're a fraud." The elevator dinged at my floor. As the doors opened, I turned back to him. "Burton, I've been thinking about that word, fraud. It's interesting how it applies to people who claim credit for work they didn't do." I stepped out, leaving him alone with his reflection. The war between us was no longer about my secret. It was about whose version of reality would survive. And I'd finally realized I liked my chances. The board test came sooner than expected. They scheduled my review for the following week, complete with a presentation requirement and formal Q&A session. But when I arrived at the conference room, I found a hostile setup waiting, my resume projected on the main screen, with my claimed Harvard MBA highlighted in red, next to a note reading, "Unable to verify." My throat went dry, but Juliet caught my eye and nodded slightly. This was the ambush we'd prepared for. I walked to the presentation controls and switched off the resume slide. "Thank you for this opportunity," I began, replacing it with a performance summary I'd prepared. "This is my actual resume. 3 years of quantitative analysis that generated over $200 million in client profits." For the next hour, I walked them through my track record. Market predictions with timestamp documentation. Trading strategies with verified results. Client testimonials praising my specific insights. Risk assessments that had prevented major losses. When I finished, the board chair leaned back in her seat. "Ms. Khan, this is impressive work, but we do have questions about your educational background." I nodded. "I understand. I'd like to address that directly, if I may." The moment of truth arrived with devastating precision. Minutes before the board's scheduled vote on my promotion, an anonymous memo appeared in every member's inbox. It detailed concerns about my Harvard credentials, suggested I'd committed resume fraud, and recommended immediate termination rather than promotion. The memo was thorough, professional, and wrong in subtle ways that revealed its author had never actually seen my original application materials. The vote was postponed pending investigation. I sat in my cubicle, watching Burton move through the office with barely suppressed satisfaction, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. But instead of panic, I felt clarity. I called the compliance department. "I need a complete audit of my employment file," I told them. "Every document, every verification request, every background check. I want to see exactly what's in there." The compliance officer seemed surprised. "Are you sure? This kind of review can take weeks." "I have time," I said. and I have a feeling this is going to be very interesting." Burton thought he'd delivered a knockout punch. Instead, he'd just given me access to information I'd never been able to see before. Information that was about to reveal exactly who was really committing fraud at this company. That night, I turned my apartment into a war room. 3 monitors, printed documents spread across every surface, and enough coffee to keep me awake until dawn. I had one advantage Burton didn't know about. The same pattern recognition skills that made me brilliant at market analysis also made me exceptional at document forensics. The anonymous memo claimed I'd lied about graduation dates, but it cited the wrong semester system for Harvard's MBA program. It referenced professors who'd never taught the courses mentioned. It described a campus building that had been demolished before my alleged attendance. Each error was small, but together they painted a picture of someone who'd researched my fake credentials online rather than having access to actual Harvard records. At 3:17 a.m., I found the smoking gun. The memo referenced a specific course catalog from 2018, but included a description that had been updated in the 2019 edition. Whoever wrote this had accessed the wrong year's information. I cross-referenced the document metadata with our internal systems. The timestamp showed it had been created on Burton's computer terminal. My fake Harvard MBA was about to destroy his real career. The digital trail led me deeper into Burton's web of deception. The anonymous memo wasn't just poorly researched, it was created using company resources during office hours. But when I traced the document through our internal systems, I discovered something even more damaging. Burton had stripped most of the metadata, but he'd forgotten about the printer routing information embedded in the file structure. The memo had been queued to print on the device in his assistant's office. The same printer he used for confidential documents he didn't want going through the main system. I pulled the print logs and found a pattern of similar documents over the past year. Internal memos questioning other employees' credentials. Anonymous complaints about colleagues' performance. Unsigned reports highlighting supposed policy violations by people who'd challenged him. Burton hadn't just weaponized my secret, he'd turned character assassination into a regular business practice. I compiled everything into a folder labeled Documentation Irregularities and scheduled a meeting with internal audit. Not as an emotional victim seeking revenge, but as an analyst presenting evidence of systematic misconduct. The numbers, as always, would tell the real story. Burton's reckless trading finally gave me the weapon I needed. While focused on destroying my promotion, he'd gotten careless with his own risk management. He'd taken a massive currency position after hours, the kind of directional bet he'd criticized others for making. When the trade went wrong overnight, losing nearly $15 million, he tried to hide it with a cross-book transfer that lit up our compliance systems like a Christmas tree. I was working late when the alerts started flooding in. Unauthorized position sizes. Improper risk categorization. Missing approval documentation. The audit trail looked like a textbook example of everything we trained people not to do. I didn't report it immediately. Instead, I requested that risk management expand their routine review window for quarterly completeness. I didn't sign my name to the request. The system allowed anonymous compliance suggestions, and I'd learned to use every tool available. By morning, Burton's trading violations were under formal review. His attention was now split between attacking my promotion and defending his own position. I'd successfully opened a second front in our war, and this one was fought entirely on terrain where I had every advantage. The client recording was pure gold. Mrs. Jennifer Holbrook from the Teachers' Pension Fund called to complain about changing terms on an investment mandate Burton had sold her. Apparently, he'd promised risk exposure caps verbally that were never included in the written agreement. Standard industry practice required all client communications to be recorded, but Burton had a habit of taking informal calls that somehow avoided the logging system. I requested the call recordings through proper channels, claiming I needed them for client service follow-up. When I found the conversation, I understood why Burton had tried to keep it off the books. In minute 12, he explicitly promised risk limitations that our standard contracts didn't include. In minute 18, he guaranteed performance benchmarks that were mathematically impossible. In minute 23, he made verbal commitments about fee structures that contradicted our published rates. Each promise was a compliance violation. Together, they constituted fraud. I transcribed the entire conversation, time-stamped every problematic statement, and cross-referenced his promises against our actual contract terms. The gap between what Burton had promised and what he delivered was wide enough to drive a regulatory investigation through. And that's exactly what I was planning to do. Juliet's gambit surprised even me. "If you're ready to pull this thread," she warned during our weekly coffee meeting, "the whole suit comes apart. Burton won't be the only casualty." I looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "I've been building my own case. The compliance violations, the unauthorized trades, the client misrepresentations, they don't exist in isolation. Burton's been operating with implicit approval from people who should have been supervising him." She pulled out a folder I'd never seen before. "I've already opened a formal investigation with internal audit. Not about your credentials, about his conduct. The memo attacking you was just the evidence I needed to demonstrate a pattern of retaliation against employees who threaten his position." I wanted to cry, but instead I felt something harder settle in my chest. "You did this without telling me?" "I did this to protect you," she said firmly, "and to protect the next person who might fall victim to his methods. Your fight stopped being personal the moment he put that anonymous memo in writing." I realized then that Burton hadn't just made an enemy of me. He'd made an enemy of the entire compliance infrastructure he'd been circumventing for years. Burton's nuclear option revealed the desperation behind his polished exterior. He walked into my cubicle during the lunch hour when most people were away and dropped a folder on my desk with theatrical precision. "Background verification proposal for senior positions," he said, his voice dripping fake sweetness. "New company policy." I opened the folder and found a detailed plan to audit all educational credentials for anyone being considered for promotion. My fake Harvard MBA would be exposed to every gossip in the building. My career would be over. My reputation destroyed, my secret weaponized for maximum damage. I looked up at him, watching his satisfied smirk, and realized he'd just made his fatal mistake. "This is interesting," I said calmly. "Very thorough. Should we implement it immediately?" His smirk faltered. "What?" I said, "Let's do it. Full background checks for everyone in leadership positions." I pulled out my own folder, the one I'd been building for months. "We should probably include trading compliance reviews in the same audit, for completeness." His face went pale as I showed him the contents. Unauthorized trades, missing documentation, client misrepresentations, forged approvals. After all, if we're investigating educational fraud, we should probably look at financial fraud too. He grabbed the folder and fled. The hunter had just become the hunted. The regulatory investigation began with a knock on our office door. Internal audit had escalated Burton's violations to the Securities and Exchange Commission after reviewing the client recordings. Suddenly, external investigators were requesting our trading logs, compliance documentation, and client communication records. The question was no longer about my missing Harvard MBA. It was about Burton's missing ethics. The SEC audit team set up in our largest conference room, spreading documents across every surface like crime scene investigators. They called me in as a witness, not a suspect. "Miss Khan," the lead investigator said, "we understand you've been documenting irregularities in Mr. Walsh's trading practices." I nodded, pulling out the organized files I'd been maintaining. "These are time-stamped records of compliance violations, unauthorized trades, and client misrepresentations spanning 18 months. The investigator's eyebrows rose as she flipped through the documentation. "This is extraordinarily thorough. Did you compile this as part of an official compliance role?" "No," I said quietly. "I compiled it because I believed someone needed to." By the end of the day, Burton was suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. Leadership asked me to participate in the ongoing review. Me, the woman without the right degrees but with all the right evidence. The final confrontation took place in the same conference room where this all began. I laid out the timeline like a prosecutor presenting to a jury. The forged anonymous memo with Burton's printer ID, the time zone errors that revealed his sloppy research, The unauthorized trades that violated company policy, the client recordings that demonstrated systematic fraud. Burton tried to interrupt repeatedly, but the board chair silenced him with a single tap on the table. When I finished, internal audit recommended immediate termination pending criminal investigation. Securities regulators were considering charges for client fraud and market manipulation. His professional licenses would be suspended indefinitely. Burton stood up so fast his chair shot backward across the polished floor. "You can't do this to me," he said, his voice cracking with panic. "I built this department. I made this company millions." The board chair turned to me with something that might have been respect. "Miss Khan, given the circumstances, we'd like you to assume acting leadership of the quantitative division, effective immediately." Burton went gray. I stayed perfectly still, but inside, something that had been clenched tight for 3 years finally relaxed. The fraud was over. The real work could finally begin. 2 weeks later, the board made my appointment permanent. The press release mentioned performance-based leadership transition and commitment to compliance excellence. There was no mention of Harvard, no apology for the years of stolen credit, no acknowledgement of the systematic harassment I'd endured. But there was also no question about my qualifications anymore. I called the quantitative team together for our first official meeting under my leadership. "We're implementing one simple rule," I announced. "We promote results, not resumes. We value integrity over credentials. We judge people by what they accomplish, not what letters follow their names." Through the conference room window, I watched security escort Burton from the building one final time. His corner office was being cleaned out, his name removed from the door, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the difference between appearance and substance. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Merit-Based Hiring Policy. Somewhere behind me, phones were ringing with clients requesting meetings, reporters wanting interviews, and headhunters offering opportunities I couldn't have imagined just months before. But I didn't turn around to watch Burton's final departure. I had a department to rebuild, a team to lead, and a future to create where nobody like me would ever have to choose between truth and opportunity again. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't destroying your enemy, it was becoming everything they'd tried to stop you from becoming.